this has been another important day for the history books. In Washington today, the Senate and the House of Representatives began debating one of the most fundamental responsibilities of Congress, the right to declare war. There is nothing President Bush would like more than resounding support for going to war if the Iraqis are not out of Kuwait by next week. No one doubts the president can start the war, but there are certainly doubts in Congress about the timing at the very least. On Capitol Hill tonight, ABC's Jim Wooten.
Sometimes it's hard to see history actually being made. Nevertheless, this was not just another day in Congress.
So today, the Senate undertakes a solemn constitutional responsibility.
Mitchell, the Democratic leader, introduced a resolution challenging the president's authority to order an attack on Iraq by himself and the wisdom of doing so now.
The grave decision for war is being made prematurely.
Wait, he and a parade of his fellow Democrats argued. Nunn, Leahy, Simon, Kennedy, Biden.
What's the hurry for war? What's the hurry?
But the Republican leader asked how long the country should wait.
30 days, 30 months, 30 years. And so I'm not certain what kind of a signal that sent, but it seemed to me it takes Saddam Hussein off the hook.
What's required, Dole argued, and so did Republicans Danforth and D'Amato, is a clear message to Baghdad that America speaks with one clear voice. Today's most passionate voice had not been heard before in the Senate. Freshman Democrat Wellstone of Minnesota, his very first words on the Senate floor.
The fathers and mothers of young men and women from Minnesota who are now in the Persian Gulf have not forgotten what war means in personal terms, and we must not forget either.
Republicans have yet to offer or even draft a resolution of their own. It's not clear why, but they may be trying to devise a version that matches the UN resolution, pleases the president, and has broad support in the Senate. That won't be easy. Jim Wooten, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
There was some feeling that the breakdown of talks in Geneva yesterday between the U.S. and Iraq might make Mr. Bush's job in Congress easier. But Mr. Bush and his aides were working hard today to make sure he is not embarrassed on Capitol Hill. At the White House tonight, ABC's Britt Hume.
The president, relaxed but deeply pessimistic that diplomacy can work, was busy today trying to make the war threat more credible by getting Congress behind it. He met with senators whose support he's counting on. They later reported that he would be satisfied with even the narrowest vote for a resolution authorizing force.
The president made the comment again that if it's an affirmative vote, he wants it. In other words, he's not looking for 70 or 80 votes. 51 will be good enough.
Republican Whip Simpson said the meeting also indicated the president's allies can block by filibuster any resolution that doesn't give Mr. Bush the authority he wants.
There are obviously going to be enough people there in both parties to prevent the passage of any kind of resolution which is not going to be most helpful to the president. It's right down to that.
Defense Secretary Cheney was on Capitol Hill trying to persuade former congressional colleagues to support a war authorization. In addition, this letter to Congress from CIA Director Webster surfaced today. It says sanctions, while hurting, are unlikely to get Iraq out of Kuwait within a year. Senators at the White House today said that assessment could be critical, since Webster only weeks ago had seemed so optimistic about sanctions.
His subsequent conclusion, about a month later or whatever it has been, would be very relevant, I believe, particularly in the minds of those who believe that all we need to do is give time for sanctions to work.
So the president seemed to move closer to getting the congressional authorization he wants. One reason he may not care much whether it's by a small margin or large is that he recognizes that if it comes to war, he, not Congress, will get the credit or the blame. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
The next diplomatic move appears to be up to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Javier Perez de Cuellar. He is on his way from New York to Paris this evening, and from there to Baghdad for a meeting with Saddam Hussein on Saturday. Since nothing the U.S. has tried directly has worked, Mr. de Cuellar will try an international approach. Here's our national security correspondent, John McCarthy.
The proposal Perez de Cuellar is carrying to Baghdad offers to send a United Nations transition force to Kuwait if Saddam Hussein will agree to get out. The force would not include any troops from the U.S., Saudi Arabia, or any of the other coalition countries that oppose Iraq. Though Secretary Baker said today he supports the mission of Perez de Cuellar, U.S. officials give it little chance of success. Baker still does hold out some hope that yesterday's discouraging meeting with Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz will have an impact on Saddam Hussein's thinking once he has been briefed by his foreign minister.
I continue to believe that peace is possible, that we certainly continue to strongly prefer a peaceful and political solution.
Last night, Baker had a long phone conversation with Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze, describing the talks with Tariq Aziz and the need for more pressure. Shevardnadze said the Soviets would send Saddam Hussein another warning, one designed to underscore the immense destructive potential of the weapons and troops that are now arrayed against him. Now in Saudi Arabia, Baker is requesting billions of dollars more to support American forces in the Gulf. He is also asking for Saudi advice on how soon the fighting should start if Iraq fails to back down. One major concern for the Bush administration is what is known as the Israeli factor. Earlier, America's Arab coalition partners secretly assured Baker that if Israel was attacked first and then responded, Arab forces would fight in Kuwait even if Israel was then fighting on the same side. Now Baker wants assurances that nothing has changed. John McWethy, ABC News, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
The failure of the U.S. and Iraq to reach any common ground at those meetings in Geneva yesterday certainly raised the level of pessimism about a diplomatic solution. 86% of the people that our polling unit spoke to overnight now believe there will be war. 72% thought so last weekend. People believe in using force if it's necessary, but we do find people supporting every possible means to avoid the fighting. 79% think the U.S. should have further talks with Iraq, and 66% of those our polling unit spoke with favor that international conference on the Arab-Israeli issue, which the president says would only reward Iraqi aggression. In a moment, our report from Baghdad tonight has the diplomats prepare to leave. And then Arab Americans who resent being singled out for attention by the FBI. And on the American agenda, keeping rapists from raping again.
Talks had failed. It was in all the papers here. It was a front-page story reported without editorial comment. Many were hoping that the talks would work out. Now they have to prepare for war. There are no outward signs of fear, but there's anxiety everywhere. Iraqi television has resumed civil defense announcements, simple precautions against airstrikes, basic first aid instruction for simple injuries. Diplomats inside the U.S. Embassy are still shredding files and preparing to close down the mission. They'll probably leave Saturday. The British left this morning, driving overland to Jordan. And other Western diplomats are planning to leave town too, a clear indication to the Iraqis that nobody holds out much hope for peace here anymore.
United Nations Secretary General Perez de Cuellar is scheduled to arrive here Saturday. Some say in a last-chance effort to avoid war by suggesting a UN peacekeeping force go into Kuwait. But the Iraqi position remains unchanged. There will be no withdrawal from Kuwait unless there's a solution to the Palestinian issue. Tom Aspel, NBC News, Baghdad.
What Iraqi censors cut from Tom Aspel's report were comments from Iraqi citizens. One of them said she felt sad because the Baker-Aziz meeting in Geneva had failed, and another said, "We love life. We want to live." When Nightly News continues in a moment, we'll take a look at the accelerating congressional debate on whether to go to war or not.
U.S. diplomat saying he's not worried about violence.
I've been assured since August 6th by the president of Iraq of my own personal security and of the security of my staff here.
The State Department has chartered a plane to carry the last remaining American diplomats out of here on Saturday morning.
Iraqi citizens are not permitted to leave the country, even if there is a war. Many waited in long lines today to stockpile gasoline so they can evacuate the capital quickly. On television tonight, there were civil defense announcements explaining how to find bomb shelters in case of an air raid. Gary Shepard, ABC News, Baghdad.
There is none of the same sense of urgency in Saudi Arabia. 5 months ago, the Saudis were terrified they would be invaded. ABC's Linda Fatilla reports tonight they are almost calm and confident.
The weekly air raid drill provokes little response. At civil defense centers, boxes of gas masks go untouched. And on the local news, there have been no official warnings. On the streets, many Saudis say that if the U.S.-led multinational force does not deter Iraqi missiles, Allah will.
I haven't really been with anybody who's been nervous about what's going to happen, because they're all Muslims. You know, their good faith coming from within as protecting them.
That faith is not shared by hundreds of thousands of foreigners working in the oil-rich eastern province. Buses leaving town are filled. All flights out after the 12 are booked.
We're concerned that if something happens, we won't be able to get a flight out. We just want to be safe.
But for most Saudi civilians, the danger seems far away.